So this video is intended for anyone who has any sort of a loved one who may someday go to the hospital. And that's pretty much all of us. And I want to make sure that I get the point across that everyone who comes into the hospital needs to have an advocate, needs to have somebody there at the bedside as much as possible, advocating for their well-being, because the way that the healthcare industry is set up today, it's just not going to work out where you're going to have some advocate from the hospital staff there, such as, you know, the bedside nurse. And this is by no means a criticism of bedside nurses, ER nurses, nurses in the ICU, whatever. It's not a criticism of them, because the way the system has evolved and the shortages in which everyone seems to be still working under, nurses at the bedside who traditionally and by training have always been told, you are the patient's advocate, they can't do it because they are essentially taskmasters. They are completing task after task after task. And there's very little or no time to actually sit, get to know your patient, talk with them for a little bit, and advocate on their behalf, particularly when, you know, the physician staff makes their rounds. So just a little brief background of what happened. My mother's 95. She's cognitively great and has always lived alone. My brother and I live very close by, and so an incident occurred a week and a half ago. She had collapsed at home, and I have always been hesitant to bring her to the emergency department, and for primary reasons. She's 95. And I know what the attitude is. I mean, I have to be real. And that's the other thing, be realistic. When you bring a 95-year-old into the hospital, there are some people that are going to look at that 95-year-old and see their grandmother or their mother or whatever, and really take great care of them. And then there's going to be others that are going to look and say, you're 95. What do you want me to do? You know, I mean, what do you expect? You're 95. And that attitude exists. It's just, it's human nature. So anyway, reluctantly brought her up to the hospital, wound up getting admitted. She had had a mild heart attack, ST elevation, MI. Had an echo done a couple days later, and the echo looks great. So, I mean, her heart really wasn't damaged a whole lot. But, you know, here's where it really starts to go off the rails is once you leave the emergency department and you're up on one of the floors, you get under the care of a service. Now, for her, it was cardiology service for a couple of days until they saw that the echo looked great. And then they're like, okay, well, you know, we had already decided in the ER that we weren't going to do any cardiac cath or any intervention. That was my feeling. And the interventionalist, I think, was like praying that I would say, you know, no cath, no intervention. And I think it turned out that was the right call, because she did well without it. With the cath, she might have done more poorly. But in any case, cardiology signed off on her after a couple of days being in the hospital because, well, there really wasn't anything more that they were going to do. It seemed like her heart was functioning pretty well. So she falls now under the medicine service. And the attending that was on, I know very well, we're friends, but, you know, he's covering God knows how many patients. Plus, he's one of the associate chief medical officers, so he has admin stuff that he's dealing with. Bottom line is, you'll get a resident that will kind of come through, you know, maybe once in the morning for 30 or 45 seconds, and then if you're lucky, you might see him again in the evening. After that, it's up to the bedside nurses to take care of any issues that come up. It's up to the bedside nurses to call that resident and say, hey, patient needs X, Y, and Z, and then make sure that it gets taken care of. But the nurses they're stretched, they're busy. And so you have to have an advocate at the bedside. You have to have a family member, whether they know anything about healthcare or not. You have to have somebody there pretty much all the time to ask questions and you know, say, hey, you know, I don't understand what's going on. Can you take a second and just explain it to me? It's important. It's important. And I think most healthcare providers, if they're honest, are going to agree that it's important to have people at the bedside that you can communicate with, that maybe can disseminate information to the rest of the family. But anyway, she had some additional issues as a result of her collapse. She had injured her neck. There was a question of atlanto-occipital dislocation of the neck. Was put in a cervical collar, neurosurgery, consulted, and therein lies another hole in the system. You have services like neurosurgery that are very busy. They're also very focused on trauma, and they're in the OR all day. And a 95-year-old with a questionable neck injury is very low on their priority list, and so you're not going to have a lot of communication with neurosurgery. And I'm not going to say it's not because they don't care, but it's just, they have to prioritize. And so you're not going to get a lot of face-to-face communication. So that's an issue, is that you really fall into a situation as a patient where you don't know what's going on. And you don't have like a general contractor who's just kind of overseeing everything in the same way that, maybe we did back in the day. Again, I think it just all comes down to, you have to be an advocate for your family member, because your family member is in the hospital for whatever reason, and they don't know whether it's daytime or nighttime. They're going to get confused. I don't care who they are. They're going to get all screwed up. They're not sleeping at night because they're getting awoken, 5 times during the night. So it just brings to light the importance of having a plan ahead of time. Even if you're all well, even if you're all healthy, you should have these conversations at home like, hey, what if one of us, gets hurt, gets in a car accident, God forbid, or something like that, and we wind up in the hospital? Gotta have some sort of idea in the back of your mind. How are you going to handle that? Who's going to go to the hospital? Who can be there during visiting hours? Because if no one's there, it's awful tough to kind of get that communication. It's awful tough to pick up the perhaps little mistakes that might happen along the way. Again, it's our system. And I think we all assume that our healthcare system is running perfectly. We know it's not, right? We know that there's tons of problems, but the purpose of this video right now is to just plant that idea in your head that if something were to happen, have a backup plan. What would you do? Who would you have there as your advocate? Even if they know nothing about medicine or healthcare, just physically having somebody there at the bedside as often as possible it's important. It's important. So that is what I'm going to say for now. There's probably a lot more things that I'm going to say about my recent experience as an advocate for my mother in the hospital. And not all bad. I mean, listen, there was a lot of good that went on there. But I also have had the chance to get out of the emergency department and see what goes on in the rest of the hospital. And it's sad, because it just seems like we should be able to do a much better job. And I know that most healthcare providers are frustrated, because I think they all feel the same way, that there's so much more that we should be able to do, but we can't, because either we don't have the bodies, or the policies don't allow it, or 100 other things. Anyway, I hope none of you need hospitalization. But if you do, just think about it ahead of time if you can. I don't know. It's tough. You can't anticipate everything, right? I will talk to you again soon. I mean, right now my mother is home and we're doing home care, and my brother, my sister, and I are taking shifts in caring for her at home. And there's a reason why I wanted to get her out of the hospital as quickly as I possibly could, because hospital is not a place to stay for very long unless you absolutely have to get out as soon as you can. I don't think anyone's going to argue that. If you have comments, questions, if you have your own insight, if you've been a patient recently, if you've had a family member who's been a patient in the hospital, if you're a healthcare provider and you want to offer your own commentary, please, I would love to see it. I think others would like to hear what others' experiences are. So please leave your thoughts in the comments, and I'll talk to you on the next video. Thanks. Bye.